I'm at InfoSec 2024 with Jaye Tillson from HPE Aruba Networking. I got that right, yeah?
You did indeed.
Excellent. For those that don't know, Jaye, what is it that you do and what is it that HPE Aruba Networking does?
So I'm a field CTO. Basically what that means is I spend a lot of time at events like this, toolkit, customer events, hold CISO roundtables, etc. Very much kind of the customer evangelist within the company. I spent 25 years being a customer, so I still wear that hat. So really what I do is take what the customers want and need and feed it back internally to R&D and PLM. What do we do at HPE Aruba Networking? Aruba's a well-known networking and switch and Wi-Fi vendor. They acquired Silverpeak, which was an SD-WAN vendor, and then they acquired my company that I was working at, Access Security, which was an SSE vendor. So really what we're doing is everything zero trust for the users, all the way from their device, all the way on-prem, all the way through all devices.
In a couple of sentences, and for the uninitiated, I know it's a big thing, what is zero trust? Or more importantly, what isn't zero trust?
Zero trust is not a single product, it's a strategy. It's really all about connecting users from their devices just to applications and services that they need to access. So very different than what we've always done, which is flat, wide open networks with everyone being able to go everywhere. And obviously that spreads things like ransomware, or can spread things like ransomware, malware, etc. It's really about giving users access to just the things they should have access to and nothing more.
Yeah. Interesting, you mentioned ransomware and other threats and risks. You know, in the grand scheme of things, what are some of the kind of big cyber risks that you see some of your customers or just the general world dealing with at the moment?
I think social engineering threats. People can be loose with information. I've heard of people going through trash cans and getting information and just asking people simple questions like, when were you born? What's your favorite football team? Do you have a pet? Da, 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 da. And being able to break in by guessing people's passwords. But I honestly think the top threat still is ransomware. We see it all the time. It wasn't that long ago that you could be compromised and you would never know because someone would come in, take data and use it and you wouldn't know. Now you know because you're held ransom for your data. So I still think it's the most prominent and unfortunately it's actually growing. And I think it's something that we need to consider and concentrate on over the next 1, 3, 5 years. I hope we get better at it.
Absolutely. There's a lot of conversation taking place around ransomware payments and the rights and wrongs and the, big question with no simple answer. And some governments are trying to look to ban these things and make it illegal. What's your opinion? Is that a realistic strategy?
Why'd you have to ask me a challenging question? From a moral point of view, you should never pay the ransom because basically you're funding companies or countries or whoever it might be and encouraging them to do more. But if I'm sat on a board of directors and the question mark is, do we go under? Does the business disappear? Do we lose all of our staff, all of our shareholders? Do we really create a massive problem? Or do we spend 50 million on paying the ransom? It becomes a little bit of a harder conversation.
It does.
If you're making $1 billion a year and you're employing 10,000 staff and you've got shareholders and it's quite a small number to pay. I can see why those decisions get made. I still don't believe it's morally right, but I can totally understand why people do it.
I think there's a wider question as to whether or not outlawing payments is even going to work. I don't necessarily know criminal enterprises, but I doubt an organized criminal gang, when its revenue stream is threatened, is just going to go, oh, you know what, we're just going to get a proper legitimate job. Generally speaking, they don't respond well in the short term to those kind of things.
No, I think the fundamental issue is that we need to get better at protecting ourselves against those attacks.
Absolutely.
That's my honest opinion. It's going to be really, really hard to ban people making payments. I think it will probably just go undercover if you had to do that. Companies are not going to go bankrupt because they can't pay 20 million or 50 million if they're making $1 billion. You might make it illegal, but I think it would just force it underground.
Absolutely.
In my honest opinion.
When we were speaking to you earlier, you mentioned about kind of a zero trust methodology as kind of stopping things like kind of the spread of ransomware. Maybe, there's a talk of kind of public and private partnerships in relation to improving people's basic cyber hygiene and infrastructure security. That presumably can only be a good thing, right?
Yeah, for me, cyber is really about education. And we tend to educate people in the workforce. Most companies have some kind of cyber program now. Might not be great, but they tend to have one. But we don't tend to educate people outside of those kind of corporations. And we don't educate, as far as I know, people in schools or in education. And I think if we start earlier and we start to educate children, and I know some children are learning by themselves, but maybe that's the place, and then in 10 years' time, everyone will understand the risks. We were talking, like you said earlier, about training, we were talking about educating people, and we were talking about it doesn't feel like people are learning. For me, it's imperative to explain to people, why do you have to do things a certain way? Not just don't do this, but if you do this, this is what could happen. Maybe that's the way, and maybe that's a change.
I think it's important to work collaboratively with people rather than trying to impose security on them.
Yeah.
It's been really great to chat to you today, Jay. I wish you a great rest of the show.
Good to see you.
And all the best for HPE Aruba networking.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
No worries.